Hello, my friends. Hey, I wanted to run through a video with you really quick and just share my opinion on some things as the Farm Journal is sharing their opinion on a few things. Now, what we're really covering is why we started Avant. Avant was started for one core reason: farm for profit by changing the way we manage our inputs. And when you think about the conversation that the Farm Journal is having right now, looking at input prices, looking at all the struggles that are going out here in the marketplace, I'm going to challenge us. I'm going to challenge us to think about what's really happening behind the scenes of this discussion. And then we're going to ask ourselves a few questions as we go through this together. This is all about commodity prices. It's about why it's high, government involvement, etc. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this as we move forward.
I was on a farm in central Kansas earlier this week just talking about the farm economy, and one farmer told me farmers don't have a commodity price problem. Farmers have a margin problem, and one of the biggest issues creating that problem: input and fertilizer prices today. As farmers know all too well, those prices rose sharply in 2021, and from crop inputs to machinery, those prices really never came back down. So what's the root of the issue, and why are input prices, particularly fertilizer prices, so high? That's this weekend's Farm Journal report.
Just last week on Capitol.
Okay, so right out of the gate, one of the things that I'd love to chat with about is the margins. This is something that has been a struggle for multiple years. And this is a struggle long before 2021, in my opinion. We've had margin issues in agriculture since the 80s, or probably even before. You go all the way back into the 50s, input costs have been going up. Net farm income has been going down. That's the wrong direction for margin to work. So this is not anything new, but now it's gotten so tight. On-farm margins have gotten so tight that it's becoming completely unrealistic. So now with fertilizer prices the way they are, this is becoming a big deal. So I just want to make us all aware that this isn't anything new, but now it's gotten worse, and therein lies part of the issue. Let's see what the government has to say about it.
Hill, lawmakers took to task an issue farmers have long wanted answers for.
Over the last 20 years, a few big companies have bought up many of the smaller seed and chemical businesses.
The hearing was titled Pressure Cooker: Competition Issues in the Seed and Fertilizer Industries. It was orchestrated by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and that issue drew emotions from both sides of the aisle.
What's happening in America is dire. Congress must not just talk about the problems, we've got to fix them, or American farming as we know it will be forever changed.
Okay, now I have a little bit of a problem with this one. He made the comment in there that the Congress needs to fix American agriculture, need to fix this problem, or American agriculture will be forever changed. My friends, American agriculture forever changed multiple years ago. Less than 100 years ago, when we moved into this world of synthetic-based farming because we could get a bigger yield quickly, and then we wondered what happened. What happened to our margins? What happened to all of our ability to maintain a reasonable income on the farm? This happened a long time ago. Now we're just to the point where it's gotten so tight that that government feels like that they are the only solution. They are the only ones that can fix this. Now, I disagree with that. I personally think this can be fixed on the farm. I personally think some of the greatest leadership that we've ever seen in this country comes from small communities in the farming community. That's what I truly, truly believe. And Avant will stand behind fighting for the farmer to make these decisions before government makes these decisions. And obviously, there's some things that government may be involved in terms of foreign trade and foreign relationships. But is the government able to fix the core of this problem? Is the government truly going to fix the core issues that we're facing? I don't think it can. I'd love your thoughts and your opinion on it. I'd love to hear your feedback on whether or not this senator is correct, this congressman is correct. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because if the government, I may be looking at this the wrong way. If the government has a solution, then we need to look at that. but I just don't know what it would possibly be. So again, let's hear your thoughts.
The point of the hearing was to uncover forces driving the soaring costs of inputs and identify practical steps to restore competition. And of the 6 witnesses who provided testimony that day, 2 were farmers.
If the market becomes too constricted, it is ultimately the farmer who loses. Fertilizer pricing has become very volatile, with at times wild swings in cost varying as much as 25 to 50% from year to year.
Farmers are paying more than ever to grow their crops. In just 5 years, seed prices have increased by 18%, fertilizer by 37%, pesticides by 25%, machinery by 23%, and interest expense by 37%.
Now, I find that extremely interesting. We've seen that much increase in just 5 years. And then they were talking about the volatility up and down. That's a major problem. And it's also something that Avant is taking on with alternative inputs. One of the requests from farmers that I've worked with all over the country, they are asking for a more stable input management system. And is that something that we can really deliver? I think it is. I think we truly can when we start looking internally, when we start looking at the field, we start looking at nature's cropping cycles. When we start looking at alternative forms of input management, I truly think we can truly change what we're talking about here. I think we can start seeing prices stabilize. I think we can start stabilizing the cost increases. Now, there are some cost increases that are still going to be outside of our control. So why not control what we can control and take control of our inputs? Now, I'll have some more on that here in a minute. Now, this next guy, he's actually the CEO of the Fertilizer Institute. You might find some of his comments interesting.
Expense by 37%.
But it wasn't just farmers. Corey Rosenbush, president and CEO of the Fertilizer Institute, was there to represent the fertilizer industry. Rosenbush speaking to AgriTalk's Chip Flory this week on his view of the fertilizer landscape.
It's a challenging time for growers, and I think in some cases it's even harder for the American farmer right now than it was a few years ago when we saw some of the really explosive markets take off. Because at that time, at least, commodity prices were high.
Rosenbush stood his ground, saying it's global forces that are to blame for much of the squeeze.
The factors that are driving this market are, frankly, outside of our control and honestly, outside of this country's control. Geopolitics this time is taking the headlines when it comes to driving supply-demand factors.
Russia's war in Ukraine, China's export restrictions, and energy volatility all ripple through fertilizer markets. But while Rosenbush points to geopolitics, farmers see a deeper structural problem, and that's too few suppliers and not enough competition today.
The bottom line is that we don't have many places to get our inputs from. I mean, I might have a half a dozen retailers in Bremer County, but when you go a little bit farther, they pretty much get all their phosphorus from one company. They get all their potash from 2 companies. They get all their nitrogen from maybe 3 companies. And I'm talking about fertilizer, but the same problem exists in the seed industry.
Iowa farmer Mark Mueller was supposed to represent the Iowa corn growers during the hearing. He says he was disinvited, and he thinks it's because of how outspoken Iowa corn has been on the lack of competition in fertilizer today. But he still attended the hearing in person, and listening to all the testimonies, he says there was one comment that really stood out.
The most disingenuous statement I heard in the entire time came from the CEO of the Fertilizer Institute, that there are 20 unique companies that supply fertilizer inputs to the industry. Now, I would say that's kind of like General Motors saying they're actually made up of 4 or 5 unique companies, Buick, Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac, it's all one company.
In your opinion, Josh, is there enough competition in the fertilizer industry today?
Here's why I can't be a politician. No. Simple answer. No. And I wouldn't say it's a monopoly. It's an oligopoly. When you look at nitrogen, there are 3 players that control the vast majority of production. When you look at phosphate, there's one main player out there.
From tariffs and countervailing duties to
Okay. Now, when you think about what they're talking about there, this whole idea behind competition and things of that nature, Mueller, the farmer in Iowa, had some really, really great points. And that's something that I've been watching since 2014-15 as I was watching some of these mergers take place. I was sitting in some corporate retail environments at that point in time, and I'm listening to a lot of these conversations. And to be honest, those people were actually looking at getting control over their markets at that point in time. So these conversations were happening long before that. Now, do we need more competition in this industry? Sure. The real question, though, that I would have is this a competition play that's good for the farmers? Would it be better for the farmers to step into a space where they don't have to deal with that kind of competition and they just deal with the competition happening inside their fields? What if we found a better way, a different system to manage these fertilizer inputs and even some of the seed inputs? We found alternative options. We take back control on the farm, because one of the things that was mentioned is things are out of our control. Like the CEO of the Fertilizer Institute said, this is a global problem. This is a geopolitical problem. Is it really? Is it really? Or are we just pointing fingers of blame at someone else? And those are the things that I would challenge us all to think about right now, is what we can actually do differently to look at competition differently. I know one of the things we talk about in our business is we are our biggest competitor. Our thinking yesterday has to challenge us today and drive us forward to the next level. If we can be better today than we were yesterday, I think we can find alternative means of driving profit on the farm. Now, you're going to hear from me as we go on through this. It's not about yield. It's not about yield. We're really, really focused as an industry on driving yield. And for the last 50 years that we've been fighting, well, probably longer, last 80 years since we've been focused on driving yield, our profits have been going down. There's all kinds of graphs and charts out here that can show that. So when you think about net income going down and yield going up and cost of production going up, what are we missing here? So the real question is, do we need this kind of competition, or should we be looking at something a little bit differently?
Even threats of new sanctions on Russia. Linville says U.S. policy is inflating prices that global trade already pushes up. And another wild card that could keep fertilizer prices high, the reported farmer tariff aid payments that could be coming from the White House.
I am taking more of the approach of, if the payments come out, I'm afraid it's going to boost fertilizer prices. It doesn't change the S&D for most of these products, but what it does is it changes the timing. Let's say we've got demand that's spread out from now all the way until spring season. If there's a big fat check that goes into the farmer's pockets and that gets spent on fertilizer, and you pull all that demand into one period.
What are the chances that we could see fertilizer come down before spring, Josh?
It's going to be very difficult. I think that's the best way to put it. You look at nitrogen. Yes, we've made some improvements. China's exporting a little bit more. Russia's exporting a lot more. We've got some peace in the Middle East, but we've still got production problems in places like Europe, and China's all of a sudden slowing down their export rates. There's still problems there. When you look at phosphate, simply put, China is going to cut their exports in half this year to keep their tons at home. And the world doesn't have somebody to back up and fill in that gap.
Linville doesn't see much chance of short-term relief. But is there a different way to bring fertilizer prices down? That's exactly what Chip Flory asked the Fertilizer Institute this week.
If we would just stop exporting and start stockpiling instead, would that be something that would bring some price relief to producers?
It still does not change the fact that we have to import 40% of our phosphates. And so that's going to be the big driver. We're kind of price takers when it comes to what the price of phosphate is. And even if we did want to, take a page out of the Chinese book and just say no more exports, we're going to keep it locally, we don't have the infrastructure to stockpile.
And what's being
Okay, so now I have a couple of questions about that. But the big one that I'm going to drive home is, do we need that 40%? Now, part of the reason that I asked that question is over the last several years, last 10 years for sure, I've really been watching these farmers who have put zero phosphorus products out into their farms. They've stopped their dry spread. They've stopped their 1034-0 application. They've focused on alternative options. And they have not put dry spread products out. They haven't put liquid products as far as phosphorus goes out into their farms for multiple years. And what I find interesting is their numbers are stable. They're not mining their soil. They're not losing it. It's stable. So you have to ask the question of why? Do we really need to be thinking about this 40% coming in? Do we need it? Or is it something that we can simply just say, look, we're done. We don't need that anymore. The U.S. is going to farm differently. Now, obviously that takes a lot of different education, which Avant is all about. It's a different input management system, which Avant is all about. But it simply has to be looked at, in my opinion, because now we're putting all of our attention into Europe and China and Japan and all these other countries. Well, how does that make us a secure country? I think that's something that we need to look at. If we can embrace nature and the natural cropping cycle, could it be possible that we don't need that fertilizer from China? Could it be possible that we can survive more profitably without it? What if our industry took on that approach?
Called a victory for America's farmers and fertilizer industry, the Trump administration this week making phosphate and potash, 2 of 10 additional minerals now deemed critical. It's a move that could help speed up mining permits and encourage U.S. investments. This is something industry leaders were also pushing for in the hearing. But if you ask farmers, they also need a quick fix, as fertilizer prices are one of the biggest pain points today.
Now, to open the hearing, Senator Grassley called for the Trump administration to lower input tariffs on Moroccan phosphate, which he argued has hurt farmers. He says this is a problem the last administration didn't fix and says this could provide immediate relief for farmers, at least on phosphate. But Grassley also helped reintroduce the Fertilizer Research Act this year, a bipartisan bill that requires the USDA to conduct a comprehensive study of the fertilizer market and then publish a report on it that includes looking at competition and concentration. And Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins has said USDA and the DOJ will work together to take a hard look and scrutinize competitive conditions in the agricultural marketplace.
Okay, I have a problem with that. I almost find this comical. The Fertilizer Research Act, really? This isn't Fertilizer Research Act. This is company research, competition research. This isn't fertilizer research. If you want to do fertilizer research, let's go out to the farm. Let's look at where we have nutrient use inefficiencies, and let's do real research on nutrition inefficiencies, and let's find solutions there. The real solutions, the nature-based solutions, the systems that are created to do the right things in the field for those farmers. To sit here and spend all this money, I mean, this is going to be millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars even, doing all this research, all this stuff over the next several years to come up with the same answers. Guess what? We need more competition. We can go and break down a monopoly, but does that really work? No, it hasn't. You look at what's happened in the past in a lot of these large companies. They when the monopoly was broken up by the government, the companies just got bigger and had more control. They were still all interconnected. So I'm not sure that's the answer. Okay. So when we start looking at this from the farm perspective, what are the real answers? Maybe we do need to do some fertilizer research, but what if we did that on farm research? What if we got farmers together and farmers were driving these decisions? What if farmers came together as a whole and said, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to look at the world from a different perspective. We want different education. We want a different outcome from our government. We want a different discussion. Maybe a discussion is like, how do we do this at home? And the farmers drive this. Could you imagine for a moment what would be different if it was farmers from the West Coast, from our central states, from the Midwest here, from the South? If it was all farmers who are relying on that farm to be their income, what would that look like if they were the ones in Washington making decisions? It would be a totally different game. And that's what I would challenge us all to really think about here. What is it that the farmers are up against? It's their land, it's their inputs. They've got some of the most valuable, asset in the entire world, which is the soil. And yet there's so many people outside of the farm making decisions for that farmer. How is that right? I think we need to be adjusting that a little bit and ask the farmers what needs to really, really happen, and do it at a much larger scale and do research from the farm perspective, not the company perspective. That's been done so many times in the history of the U.S. It doesn't make sense. So as we move forward, I think that's my opinion on one of the directions that we could go to start making changes. So we're going to wrap it up here. I don't know if there's much more
inputs,
to be said.
including fertilizer, through antitrust enforcement. She actually sat down with Joe Vaclavic on his podcast this week, answering questions that farmers submitted. So what were Joe's biggest takeaways from that one-on-one? He joins us next.
U.S. Farm
All
Report
right,
is...
so that's about it on this, but I'd love your thoughts or your feedback on this. I truly think that if we're going to farm for profit and help our farmers break loose from this control, whether it's be a government outside of the U.S. control, another country's control, when we are in a position like we are right now, and we've been in this position for almost 80 years, how do we break loose of this? How do we break loose of this and take back the control on the farm? I think one of the big ways is to truly look at alternative inputs. One of the things that we believe here at Avant, and we believe this wholeheartedly, plants love plant food, right? Plants love plant food. We have so many plants around our country. What if we found alternative nutrition options by just recycling our residue better, getting our natural cropping system to work at a higher level? We used more of what we have and less of what we've been told we need to have. What if we did that differently? How much of a change could we make to the on-farm profits? How much could we save our small communities by driving up on-farm profits? How many new businesses could we create in a small community because the farmers could afford great people doing great things? I truly believe that we need to look at this whole industry a little bit different and take a look at our farm inputs and say, what can we do different? What can we do different? We know that's a big part of our expense. So what can we do different? That's Avant. That's what we're all about. We're here to farm for profit by changing the way we manage inputs. Thank you for taking a few minutes to watch this. Hopefully it brings you some value. I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward. God bless.